Hey, Richest you money maniacs. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be discussing how the Federal Reserve has been manipulating the stock market. Pretty exciting stuff. Let's get right to it. Hey, money maniacs. Tom coming at you from Richest You. Thanks for tuning in again. In this video, I'd like to discuss all the different ways that the Federal Reserve has been manipulating the stock market, not just the economy and the market in general, but specifically the stock market. Now, imagine for a second, if you haven't seen my video on the Federal Reserve being a private bank, make sure you go watch that. In case you haven't seen it, imagine for a second that you come to the realization that the Federal Reserve is not actually a government agency. They're actually a private bank. What would that make you think? Like any bank. They're all private banks. They're all owned privately. They're not a government institution. What would you do? What would you change? Would it maybe you'd ask yourself, oh, well, wait a minute, if they're a private bank, why are they allowed to print money? Why are they allowed to create currency out of nothing? There's another important distinction. They don't actually print money, they print currency. Money is actually the real thing that has value, and currency is just a piece of paper or something that represents the value that they're actually trying to connect to. But that's a whole different video that I've done, and if you haven't seen that one, please take a look at it too. It's a really, really great informative video. In this video, though, I want to bring to your attention the idea that this private bank, all of these private banks, the Federal Reserve banks, are all privately owned institutions, companies that have stockholders. Now, if you were a stockholder in a company, you would want your price and the value of your stock to go up constantly, right? You want to make more money from it. Well, that's exactly what the stockholders for Federal Reserve want also. So that's just good business, right? Except that the people paying them, the people that they are selling to, are the U.S. government. Who is the U.S. government? Well, it's our elected officials. You know, they represent us in Washington and at the state level and at the local level, except that actually we, the people, are actually the government, which means that when the Federal Reserve sells to the U.S. government, they're selling to us. They're making us indebted to them. They give us currency that they created out of thin air and loan it to our businesses, which then pays people and allows for transactions to happen. But then we have to pay that debt back by working hard and paying taxes. So, real quick summary, the Federal Reserve is a private bank that types in a little computer money that doesn't even get printed anymore. It's just a computer. It's just a blank check or that they write a number in and hand to our elected officials. It took them no effort, and then we spend the rest of our lives, our children's lives, our grandchildren's lives, and our great-grandchildren's lives paying that debt back to the Federal Reserve and their privately owned stockholders. Isn't that a wonderful situation to be a part of? Now, the best part is that, especially recently, it's become public knowledge that the Federal Reserve openly manipulates the market. Not just the economy, not just the global market, but the stock market specifically. Because the U.S. stock market and their Federal Reserve system here in the U.S. is very, very vital to all of the rest of the world. And the reason for that is that the U.S. dollar, the currency of the U.S. dollar, is the anchor for all of the other world currencies. Now, there's another great video I did on that too, if you don't understand that one. But I won't get into that. So it's really interesting because right now, there's so much volatility and so much attention on what the Fed is doing because of the economic crash that's occurring, and that it's become commonplace to admit that the Federal Reserve is actually manipulating the stock market. In fact, a lot of people are insisting that they do it because, well, it can't do it on its own and it's going down and I'm losing money. And so the Federal Reserve has got to do something about it. The government, our elected officials, they got to do something about it. You can't have the market go down. That's what stock markets do. That's a whole nother point. So it's become common knowledge that the Federal Reserve is actually manipulating the stock market. Now, I'm going to read to you just a couple really reputable sources that admit that the Federal Reserve is actually manipulating the market. So here are a few headlines that I think you'll enjoy that will emphasize how public they're admitting that they manipulate the markets. BusinessInsider.com. The Fed has been injecting hundreds of billions into the market since September's rate crisis.
What?
Here's why it might not be enough to calm lending conditions. Well, why is that important? That doesn't even say stock market. That's not the point. The point is it's common knowledge that the Federal Reserve manipulates by injecting fake money into the marketplace. If it's in lending, it affects the stocks. But we'll get into that description a little bit more. So let's move on to the next article. The next article is from Forbes magazine, Forbes.com. The Fed continues to manipulate the markets.
What?
You can't get any more obvious than that. They're manipulating the markets. Forbes magazine. Let's go to the next article. This is HalifaxAmerica.com. How the central banks stoke stock prices. And in this particular part of the article, it says how the Fed pushes up stock prices.
What?
It actually explains in detail how they manipulate the market. Isn't that wonderful? It's so wonderful when it's so open and transparent that they are manipulating the market. MarketWatch.com. Opinion. The Federal Reserve has lost control of the financial markets. Boy, isn't that true? What that implies is that they're supposed to have control of the financial markets. Why would a private bank be given the authority to manipulate and control the open marketplace if we're supposed to have a free market?
What?
I thought this was a free country. I thought this was supposed to be capitalism with free markets. It sounds to me like the Federal Reserve is not free at all, and very much so that they are manipulating the market. This is actually mikesmoneytalks.ca. Hey, I used all the big names. Why not someone smaller with a good opinion, right? He does his homework. Central banks buying stocks have rigged U.S. stock market beyond recovery.
What?
What a great article. I mean, what a great headline. You can't get more transparent than that. The Federal Reserve has rigged the stock market so badly that they're never going to recover from it. Now, if you're an investor in the stock market, would you want to put your money in a stock market that you know is a fixed game? That you know is going to be fixed? So think about that for a second. You're supposed to have faith in the company that you're buying, that they're a good product, they've got a good market reach, they've got good leadership, they're smart with their money, it's a solid company, it's going to be around for a long time so that you can invest, and over the long term you can profit from owning that stock, maybe even just from dividends. They're profitable and so they pay dividends. However, they could suddenly have their stock price and dividends pushed down by the Federal Reserve just because the Federal Reserve decides, well, it's what's best for economic policy for the United States. But wait a minute. How does the Federal Reserve decide anything? What's their decision-making process? Well, they're a private bank, so their first concern is always to make sure they make money for their stockholders. I mean, that's number one. You got to make money for your stockholders. And then, of course, I guess they're supposed to do what's best for the American government and the American economy. I mean, because we're the ones paying them, right? So they want to make sure that we have jobs and we have food and we have clothing and we have houses and we have medicine when we need it, and that they'll help us to save, to take care of our children and their college funds. And right? Isn't that what they're supposed? No. No.
What?
Their primary function is to make money for their stockholders, period. They don't give two blanks about you, the taxpayer, or the American economy. They make money whether it goes up or down. In fact, the stock market has lost more than 30% in the last month or two, right? 30%. And guess what the Federal Reserve has been doing? They're buying mortgage-backed securities, which makes them the largest real estate owner in the world.
What?
They've been buying stocks of companies, and not just companies that are having trouble. They've been buying stocks of healthy companies that aren't having trouble despite the health challenge that's going on right now and everything being shut down.
What?
Some companies are still making money. Amazon, right? Google, right? YouTube, all those things. They're still making money. And they're buying their stocks. The Federal Reserve, a private bank, a private company, is buying real assets with fake money.
What?
Which means you can't buy those stocks because they are artificially inflating the price still. It should be way lower for even Apple. The market should have crashed and brought Apple down to just a few bucks a share because the dollar is so valueless and the stock market is crashing so hard. Think how many shares you would have been able to buy if the Federal Reserve had not stepped in and propped up those prices. Oh, well, we can't let their stock crash. They're too big to fail. Well, actually, really what's happening is the Federal Reserve banking system is failing. The central banking system is failing.
What?
And they're so big in their own minds, they're legends in their own mind, that, well, we can't let the Federal Reserve fail because then our monetary policy will fail. Everything that the U.S. elected officials have done behind the scenes with the Federal Reserve as the support to make it happen will suddenly become transparent and available for public to know the truth. And boy, they don't want that. So I'm saying that they're manipulating the market. The media is saying that the Federal Reserve is manipulating the market. Why is that such a bad thing? I mean, it's crashing. Shouldn't someone help it keep from crashing? Here's why. There are laws in place that specifically state that it is illegal to manipulate the market.
What?
Yes, it's really that simple. Let's read those laws, shall we? Laws against market manipulation. Ready? Securities laws. So, security laws and related SEC rules broadly prohibit fraud in the purchase and sale of securities. And the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, Section 9, specifically makes it unlawful to manipulate security prices. Antitrust laws. Oh, this is good. Remember, the Federal Reserve is not just one bank. Each state has their own Federal Reserve branch. And then, of course, they have partners that they work with. So it's an entire network of banks across the entire United States. These are people who really know how to structure things so that they can corner the market. So here we go. Antitrust laws include the Sherman Act and the Commodity Exchange Act. Violations of these laws can result in government investigations and disciplinary actions, as well as criminal charges and civil lawsuits by investors and others who were harmed. Who are the others that are being harmed? If the market's being manipulated, who's being harmed? The U.S. taxpayer, who is always left with the bill to pay?
What?
And those children who have not even been born yet, who are being labeled as you must work now for your entire life to pay for this debt that the Federal Reserve created in the first place?
What?
Those are the people who are being harmed. We're talking about generations of children sold into slavery, the slavery of debt. So how do you know for sure that this is, number one, really manipulation by the Federal Reserve, right? I've already pretty much laid out the case that it's public knowledge that the Federal Reserve manipulates the stock market. And it's even more obvious every day now because of these two crises that are occurring, the financial crisis and the health crisis. And I'd like to point out something. Those are two very separate things, okay? The financial crisis has been coming for a long time. I even had videos about it long before the health challenge started. And that was just me. I'm not even really that big of an expert compared to most people. Some people out there like Ron Paul have been at it for decades saying this is not going to continue this way. It's going to crash. And guess what? He was right again. So the other crisis, actually the health crisis, was just the last little piece of straw on the camel's back. They like to say, well, it's the pin that popped the bubble. But actually, I would say it's more accurate to say it's the last straw that finally broke the camel's back, because the camel's back was so piled with so much other stuff that all it took was that last little piece, and bam, the whole thing came down. So, and it's not done coming down. You'll see this next week, in fact, what I'm talking about, unfortunately. So let's talk about what the law describes as manipulation and see if it lines up with what the Federal Reserve's activities have been. Common type of market manipulation occurs when individuals or companies distort prices or trades to create a false demand for a security. I think those articles that I read to you made it pretty clear that Federal Reserve has been buying stocks to inflate the price artificially. Check number one. The next market manipulation occurs when individuals or companies make stock trades based on inside information that is not publicly available. Insider trading. Who here listening to this video, have you ever been able to attend a Federal Reserve meeting where they decide on the monetary policy of the entire nation? Have you ever seen minutes on it? Have you ever been able to watch a video of what occurs in there? Are you kidding? It's top secret.
What?
I mean, you can't even look up who the stockholders are for the Federal Reserve, let alone listen in on the inside information of what they're going to do with the market next. You can't get more insider information than that. That's check number two. The next market manipulation occurs when individuals or companies improperly limit the number of publicly available shares in a stock. So how is the Federal Reserve limiting the number of stocks that are available? They're buying them. If they buy them, you can't buy them. And they're buying them at an inflated price because they have an unlimited checkbook. Can you imagine having a magic checkbook where you just wrote out $1 trillion and took it out and handed it to somebody, and somebody gave you $1 trillion worth of real estate or worth of company stocks or worth of gold? Wouldn't it be nice just write out a checkbook? That's what they do. They just write a check, and then we give them $1 trillion worth of real things. They are manipulating the market by making stocks not available and keeping the price up. Check number 3. The last market manipulation occurs when individuals or companies, and remember, they're a private company, spread false or misleading information about a company, often through corporate disclosures. The market is crashing. There couldn't be any more false or misleading statements than for the Federal Reserve to pretend that the market is actually safe. In fact, it's not just the Federal Reserve, it's our elected officials who have been saying to the general public, now's the time to get in. Put your money in there. It's still a great investment. You're going to get a deal. Put your money in. False and misleading statements, because if it was such a great deal, they wouldn't need to be printing trillions and trillions of dollars every day and prop up the prices. The fact of the matter is, the Federal Reserve is a private company that is illegally manipulating the market, and we are stuck with the bill. Now, if you've made it to the end of this video, I hope that this has helped open your eyes to what's really occurring. The good news is there are ways to protect yourself. I'll be happy to cover that. If anybody has questions, write them in the comments. If this was a helpful video for you, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Until then, please watch the headlines very carefully. It will make a lot more sense to you from now on. Signing off, guys.